Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Hype Movie Reviews where hype comes to die. I'm School Writer and today we're going to talk about Big Trouble in Little China. Alright, this is for the folks who voted on my little poll right from the start. I gotta warn you that this is one of my favorite movies, so I will be a bit biased, but I will try my best to be fair in my scrutiny. Big Trouble in Little China is one of the biggest bombs in John Carpenter's curriculum due to Fox sabotage. It was released 1 week from Alien of all movies. Yet it's loved by whole generations. Considered far ahead of its time, a cheesy subversive action movie. Is it as good as everyone says? I removed my nostalgia goggles and watched this movie again, so let's find out. So, what is it about? Originally a Western movie, Big Trouble in Little China is an action fantasy movie directed by the one and only John Carpenter. Released in 1986, it tells the story of Jack Burton, played by Kurt Russell, a trucker with a passion to tell his stories as he travels on the Pork Chop Express, his truck. One day, while delivering cargo to San Francisco's Chinatown, he meets his friend Wang Qi, played by Dennis Dunn, a restaurant owner. Things go awry when Wang Qi's fiancée, Miao Yin, played by Suzy Pai, is kidnapped. At first, Jack thinks that this will be a simple matter of gang warfare, except that he is way out of his depth, for the person responsible for the kidnapping is none other than David Lo Pan, played by James Hong, company owner and all-out evil sorcerer. Visuals. If you have seen any of John Carpenter's movies, you know that regardless of the quality of the overall flick, the visuals are striking. Be it camera angles, cuts or just the clothing, he strives for images that will stick into your mind. The fallen Statue of Liberty is iconic, the dog creature in The Thing, and so on. This movie may lack the iconic shots, but it more than compensates everywhere else. The costumes are diverse and really striking, from thugs of different gangs to Lo Pan himself and his 3 storms. Hell, their outfits and style were so damn cool they inspire Mortal Kombat. Scenarios are quite good as well, from the shabby streets of San Francisco to the dusty underground of a building, sewers, and the lavish office of a supernatural CEO. Set backgrounds are colorful, striking, and really well done, with things jumping the shark with neon-covered demon statues by the end, something worth of a Masters of the Universe movie. While the directing knows that the movie is meant to be absurd, it balances well between the lyricals and the realistic, and in a nice subversion of his movies of the time, Big Trouble in Little China is quite bright. The majority of the special effects and the chroma key still holds up very well, especially nowadays contrasting with modern CGI. Anything related to lightning, the Storm Death Spider Raiden, is still cool as hell. Like seeing him blowing up stuff with some wiggle of his arms or riding his lightning as if he was Mary Poppins. The monsters such as the ogre are still disgusting and scary, especially considering that normally practical costumes or chroma key are easy to sour to modern eyes. Sadly, not everything held up, especially with the advent of clearer images. Whenever someone beats up a doll, it's clearer than ever, and some of the action scenes got cheesy and not in a good way. Some silly aspects or effects that would be chalked up as minor problems suddenly become huge eyesores. The camera itself, it's John Carpenter going full action. It's good with its limitations. He knows how to put up a good pacing with dialogues that are used to properly raise or lower the tension, quick cuts being followed by longer cuts and so on, and here you see some of the tidbits of styles long lost, like the corridor shot mixed with an angle from below to show that a character is a threat, or pauses to establish comedic moments with a longer cut going back and forth between characters to let said comic tone boil before reaching its apex. So it was quite good, but nothing superb for its time. But nowadays, it aged like wine, at least for the most part. Acting. This one will be also quite fast and easy. Yeah, the acting is good. This is Kurt Russell at the middle of his career when it was still picking up steam after a string of problems. He feared that this movie would be another bomb in his curriculum, which sadly ended true, but Carpenter told him that it didn't matter. This seems to be the overall impression of Russell's acting here. It's good and he nails the complexities of the character, but he doesn't go overboard and it feels as if he is having fun with his role, because success or failure doesn't matter here. This was my first movie seeing Dennis Dunn in action, and I think that he did quite a fine job. He does have a nice chemistry with Kurt Russell, nothing really bombastic, but good. You do get the idea that both of these characters are friends and that Wong enjoys Jack's company, especially due to his bravado, feeling as if he's using Jack to lift his own spirits. Sadly, whenever it's time to get more serious and add some gravitas to the situation, he struggles. But again, this is an action movie, not Shakespeare. The actors of the Three Storms also struggle to act because they are martial artists first. But Carpenter wisely keeps their acting sense to a minimum, reserving them to the action scenes. On the other hand, Lo Pan is one of, if not the iconic role of James Hong in his really long career, and it's for a damn good reason. He easily dances the line between the cheesiness of the action movie and the creepiness of a horror creature with gusto, and is quite expressive both in face and behavior regardless of the layers of makeup on him. Of the support cast, I have no complaints. Kim Cattrall does play a good electric lawyer focusing on the truth, which synergizes well with Kurt Russell's more showboating smooth man. Victor Wong as Egg Shen is just as iconic as Lo Pan, serving very well as a counterbalance between the weird and the mundane, also seemingly have a lot of fun in his role. Sadly, not everything aged gracefully. Ironically, the action scenes are by far the biggest weakness of the movie. For the time the movie was made, they were actually quite good, and John Carpenter does quick cuts well and to hide the stunts and make a chaotic feeling while keeping it visible enough. But nowadays, after an entire generation of Jackie Chan movies with full contact fights, seeing Big Trouble in Little China again made me realize how insanely stiff everyone was. The ideas for the scenes are good, and so are the tricks of the trade, such as reverse cameras, trampolines, explosions, and so on, but against the more developed techniques introduced by the Hong Kong cinema, they seem insanely simplistic and downright outdated. The air-juiced scene was cool as though. Writing. While this is an action movie spoofing the 80s action hero style, seeing Big Trouble in Little China again made me realize how stupidly nuanced everything was. Pretty much like Sinners, this is a movie with a straightforward premise. You have the hero, you have the sidekick's fiancé is kidnapped, and they storm the castle. Then you start paying attention and realize that Jack Burton is in fact the sidekick and Wong is the main character. Jack is just the protagonist and audience surrogate, a stranger in a stranger land. And he is quite well written too. While he is a spoof of the muscle action hero of the time, he is quite nuanced in several ways. For example, he is the kind of jerk with a heart of gold that I admire, because for all his bravado, the very second that Wong needs any sort of help, he immediately is there to offer his hand. He starts to hesitate only when things turn supernatural and he realizes that he is way over his head. But even then, there are several moments where he shows empathy, no matter how much he says that he is only there for the truck. He is comedically inefficient in combat because he is just a brawler in a world of martial arts with constant death. But he is quick on his thinking and the movie establishes his quick reflexes for a reason and won't stop showboating and behaving as if he was the self-aware Rambo. Though I have to admit that he is a bit too inefficient, with some moments ending a bit too ridiculous and not in a good way, taking the time from the awesome combat. And then, after you watch Jack Burton be the front of the movie, you gently nudge him to the side and realize that while this is still a straightforward modern fantasy movie, there is still a lot of nuances and show don't tell that modern audiences aren't used to. There isn't much depth to the characters themselves besides Jack. Wang is the usual action protagonist worried about his lost love. Lo Pan is the hammy evil sorcerer. But take a look at how the gears move and you see a whole different plane. For example, it's never stated how Wang learned how to fight. But we just accept that because he's Chinese, which I consider that Carpenter using the old archetype of every Chinese knows Kung Fu in the movie's favor. And even then he subverts it immediately because of Wang's host, Eddie, doesn't know how to fight even though he's also Chinese. And then he subverts it again because we are shown that both of these men are also not only used to death but they killed before. There are lots of underlying themes of a Chinese population ingrained within the USA culture without enlarging much, mostly adding. Egg Shen talks about the transcontinental roads and how Chinatown came to be. One of Lo Pan's underlings used Old West style revolvers with the quick drawn pulse. And Lo Pan himself used the American dream to bring his empire into fruition. One may argue that the Chinese community was the one that brought Lo Pan into America, as if there was a piece of their homeland coexisting with this new world. Egg Shen's last words in the movie are how China is winning his heart, so there is no need to leave America. And in this mixed heritage story, there are several details shown, not told, that require a good eye and mind to catch. For example, Gracie Law, the lawyer, seems to have Chinese descendancy. She understands everyone, everyone knows her, everyone hates her, finding her annoying, and her surname has a double meaning, both in English and Chinese. It's also never stated but shown that Lo Pan needs a Chinese woman with green eyes, something probably impossible unless there was a mixed heritage. And he also sees Gracie. For a fantasy movie, there is a lot to read. But alas, sadly, nothing's perfect and there were some big problems in our little China. The first time I watched this movie, there was the theatrical version. And lo and behold, I was surprised when the version I got had a weird, needless intro with Egg Shen talking with a lawyer. This intro serves nothing but to spoil the magic is real and could be easily cut, so I wasn't surprised to discover that it was an addition mandated by producers. While the pacing of the movie is good, with its ups and downs, knowing when to stop the action and let the viewers breathe, after rewatching this flick I realized that the whole prostabulary part of the movie is just filler that could be easily cut. While comedy is spruced here and there like garlic on Italian pasta, keeping a good balance with the action and the horror, sometimes it gets a bit too much, leading to frustration. For example, the three storms are played as dreadful enemies to fight, nigh unstoppable, and each one of their deaths is hilarious but at the same time really anticlimactic. This will be for each person's interpretation, but Miao Yin is Ye classic Princess Peach in another castle. She barely features in the movie and is there to be saved. Honestly, I don't mind. Could have been used better, but it's the usual fare of the time. She contrasts nicely with Gracie, who is far more active, and it's a shame they don't interact at all. Even then, the story is simple, balancing horror, action and humor very well, helped by the dialogues. It doesn't try to bite more than it can chew, although it did have space to do more. It knows it's cheesy, but it also knows to take itself seriously enough to immerse the viewer in. It can parody elements of the movies of the time without being a farce or worse, acerbic, and this kind of balance is almost impossible to find nowadays. Soundtrack. Okay, this one is genuinely weird. I was surprised to discover that John Carpenter himself had a hand in this soundtrack. Nothing bad at all, and when I rewatched this movie I found the music to be quite fitting. The synthesizers were well used, the rhythm follows what happens on screen quite well, elevating or diminishing the tension. But the weirdness kicked in when I heard the soundtrack by itself. It's not bad, but it's definitely chaotic. While there is some obvious rhythm, at times it feels as if Carpenter started to just throwing instruments to see what would stick. There is even a marimba in the middle of this. The soundtrack would definitely have benefited from someone to clean up the extras. Other than that, the sound effects aren't bad. Definitely cheesy, and it may be up to personal tastes, but to me they helped settle in the absurdity of seeing two Chinese men flying through the air clashing swords in a weird way. Final thoughts. Again, I love this movie, and thus you should take what I say here with a grain of salt. But after going through several successes of the past without the nostalgia goggles, even movies that I loved as a kid, I feel that Big Trouble in Little China is simply really good. It's cheesy, but it balances well with the action. It doesn't take itself seriously, but it doesn't badmouth its own premise or treat everything with scorn. No wonder that, even if it was sabotaged by Fox, it endured on its own and became a fan favorite. It has its shortcomings, but they don't stop the fun I had. Thus, yes, I do recommend you see this. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. See you next time.